Imagine building a global empire from absolutely nothing. No investors, no wealth, just a dream, a broken pocket watch, and an obsession with machines. Long before the name Ford became synonymous with American industry, one man was quietly tinkering in a Detroit workshop, dismissed by everyone who thought the automobile was a ridiculous fantasy. But Henry Ford wasn't just trying to build a car, he was on a mission to change the world. What if I told you the Ford Motor Company, now worth billions, was born out of failure after failure? And what if I told you that the man behind it all risked everything, reputation, family, and financial ruin, to chase a vision no one else believed in? This isn't just a story about cars. It's about rebellion, obsession, betrayal, and one of the most unlikely comebacks in American history. Buckle up, because the story of how Ford was built with $0 is about to take you on a ride you wouldn't forget. It all began in the farm fields of Greenfield Township, Michigan. Born in 1863, Henry Ford wasn't raised among businessmen or mechanics. He grew up among plows and livestock. But while other boys were herding cattle, Henry was dismantling pocket watches and putting them back together, fascinated with how things worked. By the time he was a teenager, neighbors were bringing him broken clocks to repair. It wasn't about money, it was about mastery. But what really changed everything came in the form of a single, noisy machine: the steam engine. When Ford saw one chugging along a dusty road, something clicked. He wasn't going to be a farmer, he was going to build machines that moved people. The problem? No one believed him. In the 1880s, the idea of a horseless carriage sounded like science fiction. Engines were unreliable, loud, and dangerous. After the crushing failure of the Detroit Automobile Company, Henry Ford was broke, humiliated, and seen as a man with good ideas but no business sense. Detroit's elite had turned their backs on him, but Ford didn't retreat. Instead, he went back to the drawing board. Literally, he returned to his workshop and focused not on building luxury cars for the few, but affordable machines for the many. His new vision was revolutionary: a reliable, inexpensive automobile that every American could own, not just the wealthy. This wasn't just about engineering anymore, it was about democratizing mobility. Ford's obsession grew deeper. He stripped everything down to the basics. He analyzed every bolt, every gear, every moving part. He believed that with the right design and the right process, he could build cars faster and cheaper than anyone thought possible. In 1901, he took a huge risk and entered a custom-built race car, the Sweepstakes, into a 10-lap competition against the fastest driver in America at the time, Alexander Winton. Everyone expected Ford to lose. Instead, he stunned the crowd. His lightweight car and simple design beat Winton's monster machine. That race didn't just win him a trophy, it won him attention. Investors perked up. Suddenly, this failure looked like a genius in disguise. That same year, Henry met a group of men who still believed in his dream, or at least in his talent, with just a few $1,000s and a promise to let him control the engineering. They helped him form a new company, the Henry Ford Company. But this, too, ended in betrayal. Investors pushed for faster profits. They didn't care about Ford's vision of building the perfect car for the masses. They wanted results, and fast. By 1908, Henry Ford had grown restless. The Model A had sold well enough to keep the company alive, but it wasn't the revolution he had envisioned. It still cost too much for the average American, still required too much hand labor, still too slow to produce. He wanted to build a car that was simple, sturdy, affordable, and easy to maintain. A car for farmers, teachers, factory workers, and families. And so, in a dusty Detroit workshop, the idea for the Model T was born. Ford poured himself into the design. He wanted a car that could handle rough roads, bad weather, and amateur drivers. It had to be lightweight, but strong, affordable, but dependable. It needed to be easy to fix and impossible to break. With a team of engineers working day and night, the Model T came to life. A boxy, unassuming machine with a 20-horsepower engine, a 2-speed transmission, and a top speed of 40 to 45 miles per hour. Not impressive by today's standards, but in 1908, it was a marvel, and the price just $850. That was nearly half the price of most other cars on the market. But Ford wasn't done. He studied the meatpacking industry and how workers there used conveyor belts to move animal carcasses down a line. What if he could reverse that and bring the car to the worker? In 1913, Ford did exactly that. He introduced the first moving assembly line in automotive history. Each worker had one small task: install a wheel, bolt a frame, fit a part, over and over again. Efficiency soared. What once took over 12 hours to build now took just 93 minutes. As the Model T dominated American roads and the Ford Motor Company soared to unprecedented heights, Henry Ford seemed unstoppable. He had done what no one else could. He debuilt a thriving car company from almost nothing. His name was etched into the American identity. Newspapers hailed him as a genius. And yet, behind the factory walls and polished headlines, a much more complicated story was unfolding. Ford was obsessed, not just with cars, but with control. He didn't just want to build a better automobile. He wanted to engineer a better world, one detail at a time. That meant controlling not only how his cars were made, but how his workers lived, how they behaved, even how they spent their free time. In 1914, Ford shocked the business world by announcing he would pay his factory workers $5 a day, more than double the industry average. It sounded generous, revolutionary, and in some ways it was. But there was a catch. Workers who wanted that full wage had to live up to Ford's strict personal standards. His newly created sociological department sent inspectors to workers' homes. They asked questions about drinking habits, home cleanliness, even marital relationships. If you didn't live the way Ford approved, you didn't get the raise. It was factory efficiency taken to a human level, and not everyone liked it. Ford's control extended even further. As his wealth and influence grew, so did his need to shape public opinion. He bought a newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and used it to spread his personal beliefs, including troubling and deeply controversial views, especially anti-Semitic rhetoric that would stain his legacy for years to come. Though he later apologized and distanced himself from those writings, the damage had been done. And then there was his treatment of employees who dared to challenge him. The Ford factories were some of the most advanced in the world, but also some of the harshest. Ford refused to allow unions, hired private security to break up labor meetings, and created a climate where, by the late 1920s, Henry Ford had become more than just an industrialist. He was an American icon. But as the world modernized and the Roaring '20s brought rapid changes to consumer expectations, one thing at Ford Motor Company remained stuck in time. The Model T Ford refused to let it go. While competitors like General Motors began offering new models, sleeker designs, and fresh features every year, Ford clung to the car that had built his empire. To him, the Model T was perfect, timeless, untouchable. But the market disagreed. Sales began to decline. People wanted more than function. They wanted style, comfort, color, and choice. Still, Henry resisted. He famously once said, "Customers could have the Model T in any color, so long as it's black." But by the mid-1920s, that stubbornness started to cost him. Dealerships struggled, profits dipped, and inside the company, tension rose, especially between Henry and his only son, Edsel Ford. Edsel was everything Henry wasn't: soft-spoken, diplomatic, open to innovation. He saw where the industry was heading, toward diversity in design, better aesthetics, and improved customer experience. He pushed for change, urged the company to replace the aging Model T, and proposed new models to compete with GM's increasingly popular Chevrolets. But his father dismissed him at every turn. To Henry, Edsel was too gentle, too refined, too unwilling to fight. Their relationship, already strained, became a battlefield. Despite Henry's resistance, the pressure was undeniable. In 1927, after producing over 15 million Model Ts, Ford finally pulled the plug. The assembly lines shut down for months as the company retooled for its next big thing. Edsel's sudden death in 1943 left a massive void, not just in the Ford family, but in the heart of the company itself. Henry Ford, now in his 80s, was devastated. And with World War II raging across the globe, the stakes were higher than ever. America needed industry. It needed leadership. And the Ford Motor Company, once the crown jewel of innovation, was teetering on the edge of collapse. With Edsel gone, Henry shockingly decided to take back control of the company. But the man who once built an empire from nothing was now out of touch with a rapidly changing world. Decisions were delayed. Executives were confused. The military questioned whether Ford could even fulfill its government contracts. The company was slipping fast. That's when someone unexpected stepped forward. His name was Henry Ford, to Edsel's eldest son. Just 26 years old, he had been serving in the Navy when his father died. He wasn't a seasoned businessman. He wasn't an engineer. But he was a Ford, and he was determined not to watch his family's legacy collapse under the weight of the past. In 1945, with help from family allies and company executives, the aging Henry Ford was quietly pushed aside. The board appointed the young Henry Ford, too, as president of the company. It was a gamble, but one that paid off. Henry Ford, too, moved quickly. He brought in a team of bright minds, including a group of military logistics experts, known as the Whiz Kids, to overhaul the company's outdated systems. He slashed bureaucracy, modernized the factories, and restructured management. Under his leadership, Ford began to roar back to life. By the 1960s, the Ford Motor Company had been restored to glory. But Henry Ford, too, wasn't content with stability. He wanted domination. And not just in sales charts or factory production numbers. He wanted prestige, emotion, global respect, and he knew exactly where to find it. On the racetrack at that time, no name was more revered in international racing than Ferrari. The Italian automaker, led by the legendary Enzo Ferrari, had become the undisputed king of endurance racing, particularly at the brutal 24 hours of Le Mans, the most grueling test of man and machine in the world. Ford initially approached Ferrari with an offer to buy them out. The deal would give Ford instant credibility in high-performance engineering and racing. Negotiations advanced, lawyers drew up contracts, and everything seemed ready to close until Enzo Ferrari abruptly pulled out at the last minute. He bristled at clauses that would limit his racing decisions and scoffed at the idea of reporting to an American corporation. The deal was dead. Henry Ford II was furious. Enzo had not only rejected his offer, he had insulted his entire company. For Ford, it wasn't just a failed business deal, it was personal. And like his grandfather before him, he turned anger into obsession. The response, Ford would build a car from scratch to destroy Ferrari on their own turf. The project was called the GT40. By the 1970s, Ford wasn't just a car company, it was part of American identity. Its vehicles were woven into the fabric of everyday life. Pickup trucks on farms, sedans in suburban driveways, muscle cars roaring down highways. But beyond the chrome and rubber, the story of Ford was about something far deeper, a story of risk, resilience, rebellion, and reinvention. From a boy fixing watches on a farm, to a family dynasty that weathered wars, economic collapses, labor unrest, and bitter rivalries, the journey of Ford reflected something many Americans saw in themselves: the will to keep going, no matter what. Henry Ford's vision had ignited a revolution, not just in how we travel, but in how we live. He didn't invent the automobile, but he reimagined what it could mean. He didn't set out to become a billionaire, he set out to solve a problem. And in doing so, he reshaped cities, timelines, and cultures across the globe. The assembly line wasn't just a manufacturing method, it was a metaphor for modern life, for speed, efficiency, and scale. But for all its triumphs, Ford's story wasn't without shadows. Control turned to overreach. Innovation occasionally gave way to arrogance. Mistakes were made, controversies endured. Yet each time the company stumbled, it adapted. It learned, it returned to its roots, and pushed forward. Whether it was Edsel's quiet strength or Henry Ford II's bold leadership, each generation carried the flame in their own flawed but determined way. Through oil crises, foreign competition, corporate restructuring, and the evolution of the auto industry itself, Ford remained. When America needed trucks that could work as hard as its people, Ford built the F-Series, still the best-selling vehicle line in the country.